All right, Pod 50. We are back 2 weeks in a row. Well, we had a bit of a chat last week about speed on the track for distance athletes, or speed for everyone, and track speed, introduction to track speed. And we wanted to talk about tapering last week as well, but we ran out of time. So today we'll have a bit of a chat about how we taper for events, what you recommend tapering for other people, and there's a bit of a formula across the board. It doesn't need to be for sprinting or for distance. Everyone needs to sort of follow a similar formula. But I do believe this is one of those art and science, a little bit of science to it, but it's definitely more arty, right? The old
Definitely.
taper is a lot more art based, and I think it really depends on the individual. So I suppose just briefly, tapering normally, 2 weeks out, 2 weeks out to maybe a few days out, and we'll explain more about that in a moment. Normally keeping the intensity up of your sessions, but reducing the volume substantially, probably up to 50%, maybe having longer rest for us, but you're still doing, fairly intense work. You're not giving up your intensity, so you carry that into your competition. Yeah, what are your thoughts on tapering?
Well, there's a couple of premises that I go from when I tapering either myself or other athletes. And my fundamental premise that I always lean on, and this goes back to, and it does very much depend on the preparation that you've had. If you've had good preparation and you've hit target times and you've had some racing, like what we're seeing with the Olympic Games right now, is the Olympic Games is going to start really soon. Now, most of the athletes that have qualified in sprint events and even some of the middle and longer distance events have gone off, got all their qualifications done, and competed in their national championships and qualifying championships for the Olympics, where many records got broken. And so they're at their best right now. The Olympic Games hasn't started. Many athletes are at their best. Now, that arguably, I would say that is a good strategy. And when I'm tapering for an event, I want to be at my best a couple of weeks before, and then just start to come off with a little bit of maintenance, and which I know I'll carry into the event. But there's one fundamental principle we got to lean on if you've had good preparation. You won't get much fitter and faster in the week to 10 days to 2 weeks prior to your event, but you can get it really wrong. So even if you're in good shape and you've hit all your targets, you're better off even leaning away from some work than overtraining. Because if you get it wrong, you're going to, especially if you have to run rounds. Like if you've got to get through heats like these Olympians will be doing, they've got to get through heats, semifinals, and then to a final. That's the goal, is to keep getting through the rounds. They cannot start the heats in a position of fatigue. Can't, because they won't get through the rounds. And
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think you're absolutely spot on there, that tapering, it's fundamentally different for different sports. And obviously with our sport, when you have rounds and so forth, if you go in there and let the rounds bring you on, I think it's very different from a marathon runner, which, is leading up to a particular one-off event.
Of course.
And the other thing with tapering that I think a lot of people don't take into account, when it comes to elite athletes, you can only peak a couple of times per year. If you start trying to peak more often, it becomes extremely difficult. So, and we would do this, we would come into particular races, and if the race didn't have absolute priority, if we were trying to, really lead up to nationals, and you might have another event that doesn't have the same priority, you may not even really taper into that event, or you have a very short taper, right? We don't actually go to our 10-day or 14-day taper. It might just be the last week we just, take 15 or 20% off the volume and go into that event even a little bit heavy sometimes, because it's like, well, this is the lead up. And I think you made a good point before. For a lot of athletes, it is very difficult, because when you're still trying to, let's say, qualify for the Olympics, as some of the Australians were a little while ago, they're still running or still trying to peak just to get qualifyings. And then all of a sudden, in a month's time, they're actually going to end up racing at the Olympics.
Yes.
And they've probably run their best time 4 to 6 weeks ago. And then you see them go downhill, right?
Yes. But as you always know with when you do like Diamond League versus the Olympic Games, when you go to the Olympics, you're running for medals. When you're at Diamond League, you run for time. So, and that's fundamentally very, very different. And you see that in the middle distance events, particularly the 1500. But one of the things that is mutually exclusive about track is that training and racing are completely different. So if you need to, in an ideal world, be racing prior to a major championship, in an ideal world, which is why you see them all do it. But if you can't, which is the position I'm in right now in leading up to a major event, is it's our off season, so there's no racing, then we have to set up time trials. Because if you don't put yourself in at least some simulation of race conditions where you're racing like and doing your race plan, you don't want to be doing it for the first time in your event, having not done it for 6 months. So that's the subtle nuances of tapering as well is you know, you've got to be racing, and as I say, racing and training are so different. You've at least got to simulate some race conditions into your taper. If you're not in season, like all the Americans, they're in their track season, and the Europeans are too. All of the Southern Hemisphere countries like us are not. We're in off season. So it's so most of our athletes have had to go over and race in Diamond League, which is smart. The ones that go, that's smart. The ones that didn't, okay, they've got to figure it out for themselves back here. And I think, as I well know, when I step up for a race, I mean, I did all my time trials that I ran prior to my last World Championship, say in Finland, because I simulated race conditions, I was still 0.5 to 0.85 seconds off how fast I ran in the championship, because time trial work is not the same as racing. It's different. So you're going to lift a little bit more in a race than you will in, say, a time trial just at your local track.
Yeah, for sure. It's and we also know with tapering, going back to the science art question, how wrong you can get it. And I go back
Very
and reflect on the year that Mike was, in the best shape of his life, probably on track to at least break the state 800-meter record for the Masters for his age bracket that year. And potentially he was very, very close to running the national 800-meter Masters record for his age bracket. And that particular day when he ran that split of the 4 and the 3, and, difficult thing when someone feels so good in their session, we're 11 or 12 days out, whatever it was, and he completely overran the session. And then obviously beyond that, didn't recover for his actual race a few weeks later. And I think that's part of the other problem that, you've got to really know your athlete well and know that they're going to run the session correctly, because they still can overrun sessions. So how long, like if you're tapering for a big meet, like, it's the end of the year meet, international meet, whatever it is, what's your tapering look like and how many days out do you start your taper?
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing is that I had a really nice 10-day taper into Finland, but that was on the back of really good preparation. I hit all my target times and ran all the splits and everything I needed to do 3 weeks out from competition. I was in great shape. So I could just tune up a little bit during that week to 2 weeks running in, and then have a nice 10-day taper in. And I ran the best I've ever run. This time around, on exactly the same metrics, I'm about on say for my 350 meter time, I'm still a second away than where I was last time. And I need to now make a decision about shortening my taper and then letting the rounds bring me on closer to the event. So I'm going to train harder and a little bit more close to the event because I'm not there yet. And then take the gamble that and then do a 5 or 6 day taper into my first event, which I'm really fortunate that the first event they're going to run all the hundreds, and then they're going to run the 4x100 relay, which relay is going to be my first event, which is a nice entry into a major meet. And then the very next day, the 200 heat start.
Yeah, so typically our tapers probably for track, we would be like a 10-day taper would be pretty standard for us. And we would start to cut the volume down and increase the rest times between our runs.
Yeah.
We would actually just start to let that time out. We would still be running pretty high intensity. We still might get up to 95, 96, 97% runs, but we would actually start to have bigger breaks, push those breaks out and just cut some of the volume down. And I think that's, the typical model that most people are using. But it's interesting, if you've never tapered before, and all athletes have this mindset, I haven't quite done enough, and they keep trying to do too much right up
Yeah.
until, too close to the event. And they go into the event so, overdone,
Yeah. You're
that they
done.
actually have no recovery. And I think, track point of view, there's neural fatigue that you take into it. But I think what a lot of people discount or don't take into account enough is the mental fatigue that you also take into these events when you've been doing these really hard blocks of training in your last, let's call it 2 months. You've accumulated a lot of mental fatigue because it's so relentless. You need that taper break to actually just freshen your mind up as well. You don't need to be running really hard right into this, the last sort of week. And I know this, obviously been training for this High Rocks event, and it's pretty mentally grinding. And some of the sessions I write for myself, I turn up and it's like, oh God, I got this 45, minute session, which is just going to run me into the ground. And then all of a sudden, okay, now I'm going to go and do that in a race, and it's going to go for, my situation now in 20, whatever it is. So I think that you need to mentally freshen up as well leading into some of these events.
No, 100. You do. You do have to mentally freshen up, particularly as I say, if you got to get through rounds. I mean, typically into my taper after all my volume work is done, some of my sessions will be like the other day, even though it's a little bit far out. We had three 300s off 15-minute rest, good rests, but we're aiming for 40 flat for the whole three. Which I just fell off in the third. I just fell off a cliff a bit. I needed to just really smash that out, and I've got to feel that. And it's very different what a 100-meter runner feels and a 400-meter runner feels. I'm still, because I've been behind, I took all of April off. I'm still lifting my 400 tolerance work. I'm still in it, and I have to be because I know it's not there yet, but it's coming. Like I'm trained into about 300 and probably 60 meters of my 400. The last 40 is not quite there. So I'm still building that little bit of tolerance and running under some very hard fatigue, like running my 300 150 session, where it's a 300 almost all out. You've got to try and break 40 seconds and you get a 1 minute rest, and you've got to deliver on a 150. So you're 50 meters over distance on your run. And we're looking to split on a cumulative, when you wind it back to a 400 meter time, we're looking for 51, 52 seconds combined.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do. It's going to stress your body in a big, big way. But you're 50 meters over distance and you're running under target. So I'm still in that. But my first race, if I go, and I won't make the decision till 1st of August, isn't till the 17th of August. That's the relay. And the 400 is later again in August. So I've got time, but you can't this far, even this close, if you haven't built a certain amount of your race, you just run out of time. And then what you will do is you'll keep training because you know you're not there all the way up to it, and you actually make it worse.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the difficult thing. I was chatting to somebody the other day who's just a novice runner, and even though they've got a fair bit of time to the city to surf, they felt like already they were running out of time, and they're trying to cram all this additional training into their weeks. However, they're not prepared to give up some things. They still train in the gym. And I said, well, you need to sacrifice just a couple of gym sessions at the moment if you want your run to be better. You need to start backing your gym stuff way out. And it is difficult, particularly I recall with Anthony coaching him, he loved his gym training so much. To get him out of the gym and some of the heavy training he was doing so we got more speed on the track, he used to hate it. He always felt that, oh, well, I'm going to lose this, this, and this. And well, there's no perfect scenario. Something has to give somewhere, and we've then just got to say what's more important at the moment and where we're going to get the most amount of recovery from. Where's your body going to benefit the most from? And where can we put that additional time that we get back from getting out of the gym? I was listening to the current world record holder in High Rocks the other day. I didn't listen to the whole podcast, and He just ran 5th or 6th at the previous World Championships, and everyone thought he would go in there, and it's normally like he's going to win, then who's going to come second and third, and he was way off the pace. And on the podcast, he was talking about the other day how we completely overtrained for the event. You know, he just had in his mind he'd gone so well previously that he would just keep doing more and more and more and more, and he would just keep getting better and better and better. But we all know that once you start, the closer you're getting to your peak and the peak you can get out of your body, that just becomes a hiding to nowhere. Basically, you fall off a cliff eventually. And we've all done that. Two things either happen. You either break down with injury, or you end up just so fatigued that on race day, you just have nothing in the tank and you blow up.
You race poorly. Yeah. More never equals more when it comes to the pointy end of sports. It just doesn't translate. And interestingly, and this happened to me yesterday, I had a girl turn up. She's only young, early 20s. She's going to the 2-man bobsled trials in 4 weeks' time.
Mm-hmm.
She's an ex-weightlifter, very strong, very dynamic. And she said, Chris, I need you to build speed for me in 4 weeks. And I said, well, before I tell you anything, let me tell you all the things that you should have been doing 6 months ago. That ship has sailed. That's all gone. All the stuff we should have been doing to get you to where you need to be, we can't do. So we have to just look in 4 weeks, and you're not going to improve a lot, but what can we do to give you the very, very slightest edge? And she's got to pass a 40-meter sprint for this. This is what she's got to do in 4 weeks. She's got to arrive in the X amount of people in this group to move on to the next level. Now, 4 weeks is not very long. No. So I said to her, there's only 1 or 2 things you can focus on that is going to help you. And then the rest of it, you'll be in the lap of the gods because, as I said, you can, if you panic and overtrain and put yourself in complete neural fatigue prior to a 40-meter run, you're going to run like an absolute hack.
Yeah, and I would also say there, I'm not too sure what their testing is, but Anthony did a similar testing, but they had to do some power testing as well in terms of gym testing.
That happens too.
1 RM squat, 1 RM clean.
Yep.
They don't obviously worry about jerking balls are clean.
No, they got to do that.
He did then his 40-meter track test. There was a few tests they had to do, but it was all on the same day. So the testing there, because I was at Narrabeen, so they just went into the gym at Narrabeen, did the weight testing, then came back out and tested on the track. Well, any sort of accumulation of fatigue is just going to destroy you as a power athlete in that situation. And I suppose the decision you need to make then, if you haven't got the running sort of, in your legs and you haven't been doing any sprint training, that if you end up doing too much work and too much speed work, you'll fail at all. So if you've got a decent lift in you, at least get a decent lift out instead of destroying all your events. Maybe you can just sort of show some talent with the 2 lifts, but the track needs a little bit more work. But if you do too much work in that situation and don't do some sort of tapering and recover, then you fail in all the aspects of it, right? You turn up on the day, you can't lift, you can't run, you can't do anything. You look like a complete dog.
Yeah. And like I tell all my other athletes, and I've been going through this with another really good sprinter who's I'm trying to help with her first few foot strikes, is that and I said this to this girl yesterday, I said, it doesn't even matter how much I tell you or how much we spend on one particular thing to help you get a little bit of an edge. When you turn up to this trial and they say go, you're just going to go. Everything you've learned the last 4 weeks will go out the window. You just go. Because the adrenaline of the day and what you're about to do will just take over. And you will just not remember anything. You will just hear a sound and you will run.
Yeah.
So, we can work on stuff. We can make you a little bit stronger. We can work on that first foot strike, which is all I'm doing with it. I'm saying I'm just trying to demonstrate to her how to get her first foot strike in quickly, because that's what counts. Once you get your first foot down, the next one will take over. After that, you're just going to run. So I've just showed her how to not pick her foot up and hold it up in the air and do a big step, which most people do. is just
Mm-hmm.
to pull it through and get it back to ground and then go from there. And that will save her some time. Over 40 meters, you're talking tenths and hundreds.
Yeah,
So
100%.
it matters. And if you've ever watched, and you would have, heaps of bobsled events, you know, when you see the green and the red numbers come up, you know, so you know the good pushers, because immediately they all jump in, it's green.
Yeah,
And the ones that aren't, it's red. And how often do the ones that are in the red from the push make it up?
yeah.
Very, very rarely.
No, you
So
can't.
you can't make it up.
1/10 of the top end of the track, I think, nearly converts to a second at the bottom.
Exactly. So if you don't get that piece of the puzzle right, the rest doesn't matter. And that's why all I'm trying to teach someone, and this is also to do with tapering, is don't overanalyze and overcomplicate something when you're near the end, at the pointy end. Just get one or two things that are very simple that will give you your best bang for buck. Like one of my
Y-
last sessions in my taper will be 200-300s off full recovery and go home.
And what is full recovery for you?
Be between 20, depending on the weather. If it's nice, it's a warm day, 25, 30 degrees,
Yeah,
maybe 20 minutes.
yeah, yeah,
So if it's colder weather, I'll take a little bit longer and I'll do another short warm up before I do it.
yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, I
And they're
remember
almost all out.
many, many years ago that Ben Johnson used to do flat out 300s with full recovery,
Yeah.
and their breaks between them under his coach Charlie Francis was 45 minutes.
Yeah. But Ben Johnson wasn't a 400-meter runner.
No, 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 no. So they needed that break for sure.
Michael Johnson would do 2 450s
Yeah,
and his recovery was about 40 minutes.
yeah,
But that's 450 meters. I mean, I'm 100 meters under distance. He was going 50 meters over distance.
yeah.
So
No,
it,
no,
you know, but I
yeah, for
also
sure.
judge it on when I know and I think I'm right to go. If it's 22 minutes, I go at 22 minutes. If I'm not right, I'll wait, because the time's not relevant. What's
Yeah,
relevant is you get a quality run out. So if it
yeah, for
turns out to
sure.
be 28 minutes or even 30 or even 35, I take it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the quality that counts. But that's typically, that's 600 meters of volume and 2 runs and you go home. That's
Yeah,
it.
and that's the sort of sessions that you start to do, particularly in your tapers. That we would
Yes.
do. I remember one of mine was 3 200s, and I would have
Yes.
6 and 8 minutes between them. If I needed 10 between the second two, I'd take 10 minutes, and they weren't flat out runs, but they were normally your first 200 of your 400 speed. But I'd want to put 3 of them together, with good breaks between them.
Yes. We still do
Leading up
that
to
session. We still
yeah,
do that one.
yeah. I
I've
think
pushed
it's a
the
good
rest
session.
out a bit now to 10 and sort of 10 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for quality.
Yeah.
But yes, those 3 2s are a great session. We do it on the 3 150s as well, but just shorten the rest up a bit.
Good, good. Well, we might leave it there. I think tapering is definitely a bit of an art, and I think it's a lot of people get it very wrong. We all suffer that, we haven't done enough. Let's keep training right up until the day. And just remember that you never get it back. If once you're overtrained, you're overtrained. You're not going to recover in a couple of days. So
It's like
reduce the
cooking.
volume down.
This is one of the best things I learned from Sam, actually. It's like cooking. I'm terrible at cooking because, and with Sam, honestly reminds me, he said, if you put too much in, you can't take it out. So put a little bit, taste it, put a little bit, taste it. That's like tapering. And then I'm always blah, 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 putting so much of the ingredients in, and then it tastes like shit. And you can't take it back. So
No.
with tapering, experiment, do a little bit, see how you pull up, see how your times are going, and then lean on the underdone side, because you can always, if you've still got time, add one more rep, but you can't take it back.
No, that's for
If you've
sure.
cooked it, you're done. You can't fix it. So that's that. If there's one takeaway about tapering is be conservative, because otherwise, and even the worst thing that can happen, which has happened to me, is an injury, and you're watching it from the stands.
Yep, we've all done that.
Yep.
All right, that's the
All right,
pod.
mate. Done.
Bye for now.
Cheers.